You do realize I can only fail after that introduction to entertain you. So, and the other thing is, there's a guy behind the bar at the back who promised me a pint of beer. Oh!
There's the plastic head.
Well, that's, you know what we like a bit, the Germans like a bit of head, No pun intended. Actually, it's not true. I've got my microphone in my bra, so if I move, it makes a crackly noise. I apologize for that. I'd never been to Leeds before today, and I got up at 4:30 this morning, so for me, this feels like a dinner rather than a lunch. And if I'd known that everybody was in their finest, I would have made a bit of an effort. I didn't even wash my hair this morning, so I apologize for that as well. I never ever come prepared. I'm a bit like the Scottish version or the German version of Billy Connolly. I started one story, and if you're really lucky, I end up in the middle and then come back round to the end. So if it feels a little bit like unstructured, there is a reason, because it is very unstructured. But I always start with thanking the people who actually invited me. And I have to say, I cried when you spoke, Griselda, earlier, because when we were talking about adversity, I think that's kind of my story. The reason that I'm standing here is because really I shouldn't be standing here. I should be sitting in a law office in Glasgow, working in European and competition law, and yet I run this crazy little brewery in Glasgow. Adversity, I think, is a brilliant way to put all of this, so thank you very much for giving me the kind of the lead that will follow us through this little entertainment for you. I told somebody a few weeks ago that I was coming to speak at Forward Ladies, and he burst out laughing and he said, Petra, you make forward look backwards. So I think that kind of gives you an idea of the pace that I'm normally running at. The other thing that I think is really important is my leitmotif in life has been resilience, because the amount of shit I've had to deal with over the last 10 years is pretty significant, and I'll let you into a few secrets. But the biggest secret, I think, and you can kind of think this is funny, but it wasn't funny on Tuesday night, is that, sorry, it's very nice. I spent Tuesday night in a police cell in Glasgow. I always said if I ever write a book, there's lots of kind of saucy bits in it. I didn't think I was going to put on pajamas and sleep on a mattress, yay big, and get my cup of tea made with like the kind of the funny powder that they put into the milk. Because I actually didn't appear in court for a red light speeding offence. And actually, it's not funny, but it puts life into perspective. And I think perspective is another thing that has been really big for me. So I wrote a lot of notes while people were talking. And in fact, I think you made me laugh with your taking risk thing, because that's kind of another, thing that kind of runs through what I do. So at the moment you're going, who is this woman? What is she talking about? So, why is she here? Is she successful? Well, what the heck is success anyway? So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Petra. I was born in a tiny village in Bavaria. I grew up riding cows. Andreas, who was in my class at school, had a farm, and we didn't have any horses in the village, so I grew up riding cows. So I grew up in picture postcard Bavaria. My mum and dad used to take us to the local brewery for our Sunday lunch, and it was schnitzel and Apfelsaftschorle, say that after 3 pints of beer, and it was literally idyllic. And when I was 13, I went on a school exchange program in Scotland. Is there any other Scots in the? Woohoo! Any Germans? No. And literally, I wasn't brought up in a religious household, but when I arrived on this bus with 50 other school children in the 80s, I had this spiritual experience that I had been in this country before. Sorry about this. I'll probably not move my arms from now on. And it was very much, I knew that I belonged to that country. I really wanted to be in that part of the world. And when I was 19, I went back to Scotland with 2 suitcases. I am really sorry, I'm not doing anything. I can't, this is the stillest I've probably been in a while. And I arrived and I went to Glasgow University, and I studied politics and art history and French and all sorts of other nonsense that's completely useless in life. And in my first year at university, my dad came to visit me. And my dad is a big beer drinker. That's kind of what Germans do. And he said, "What's the local lager, darling?" And I said, "I think it's a brewery called Tennant's." So I bought him a half pint of it, and he said, "That's pish, we're not drinking that again. What else do they have? And if anybody has connections to Tennant's, please don't tell Stephen Glancy, I'm still dying out on that joke." And basically, for the entire career that I had in Glasgow at university, I got told by my dad that the beer was rubbish. And actually, he became a Guinness drinker of all things, which is not, as you know, a lager, it's a stout. But he didn't think that anything else produced in Glasgow at the time had any flavour. I then won a scholarship to go to France. I studied in France for 2 years, almost married a French fashion photographer, but is that better? Oh God, I'm not good at this kind of stuff. This is like, now I feel like a stand-up comedian. And basically, I was homesick for Scotland. I came back, and in my final year, met a guy called Gordon. We graduated in '99 together. He went on to do a PhD, and I started working for the Glasgow Tourist Board, promoting the city as a conference destination all over the world. And in my second year with the Tourist Board, I met this guy who was a very, high-profile lawyer in Glasgow, and said, "You should be a lawyer. You like arguing." Don't I know it? And so I started training as a lawyer for one of the biggest law firms in Scotland, and I did European and competition law, which suited me because, white-collar crime I think is quite interesting. It's much better than sleeping in a police cell with all the jackies. And so basically I did that for a number of years. Meanwhile, my husband, because I had married the guy in 2000, was still continuing his PhD. And I was getting a bit ratty because I was earning all the money and he was spending it quicker than I could earn it. So I was thinking back to what my dad had said about, the beer was rubbish. And so in 2006, I actually crazily, having never had a pint of beer, started a business called West Brewery in the most beautiful building on Glasgow Green in the Templeton building. You're all more than welcome to come and visit. Show your forward ladies badge and I'll buy you a pint. And basically the idea was brew it downstairs in the brewery and sell it upstairs in the bar and restaurant, and my then darling husband was supposed to run the show. So this was March 2006. I'd given birth to my son Noah in 2005, and I was a part-time lawyer and a part-time mum, and we had started this business that we knew bugger all about because we knew nothing about beer, nothing about hospitality, nothing about pretty much anything, but we had a lot of enthusiasm. What I didn't realize at the time was that my then husband was having an affair in London with a lady who reads the news on the BBC. And when and when I found out, I chucked him out, and she then later decided she liked ladies better than men, and it's the ultimate karma, isn't it? And he was so heartbroken at the time that he couldn't get his ass out of bed for a few months, and the business went bust with £1 million worth of debt. Ooh, yes, not very funny. I lost my house. I support a number of homeless charities in the country these days because I actually know what it's like to be homeless. And so I had a choice to make at that point. Noah was not even 2 years old. The ex had buggered off to America. He's on wife number 3. And it was like, what do I do? Do I become, a high-profile lawyer in Scotland doing European and competition law, or do I, buy the business back from the administrator and try it myself again? I had invested £750,000 of a future inheritance into the business, and I didn't want to see that go. So I went cap in hand back to my parents and said, would you lend me a little bit more money? And my dad said, am I throwing good money after bad money? I said, no, I promise you this time it's me who's running the show. And that's where the real journey of West starts. That was in January 2008, and I really always say that the business really only started in 2008 because before that they were playing at it. It was it was nice to say to somebody, oh, I'm the MD of West Brewery, but actually if you don't get out of bed till 11 in the morning, it's quite difficult to actually run a business. we would probably all agree with that. So what have I done differently to the regime that ran the company before me? Well, first of all, I think I'm a grafter. I think it comes from being German. I have surrounded myself with a brilliant team. And I think the one thing that I've realized that people keep saying to me over the years is that if you don't have a good team, you can't run a business on your own. So it's like finding the key players in your company that perform the jobs that they really need to do, I think is the most important thing about running a business. And I have made some real boo-boos over the years. I've trusted people who I thought had my best interest at heart and didn't, which I think is a really tough thing to find out when you realize that those people didn't really pull us much into the direction that you wanted to go to, and as you did. So that's been a really big one. I think having got people in Glasgow who thought what we were doing was brilliant was great at the beginning. So we have this guy called Derek Sutherland who runs a bar in Glasgow, and he made us into a beer brand. So very much if you think we were like, if you've ever been on holiday to Germany, we were a beer hall with a massive beer garden, granted, that had a nice turnover but basically didn't sell any beer out with the premises. And then this guy walked into our bar one day and said, that beer that you're making, St Mungo, named after the patron saint of Glasgow, St Mungo, which is a great beer. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful. And he said, I think that's the best beer I've ever had. I want it in my bar. And he turned what was a venue into a beer brand. And when it's quite funny, the introduction is a little bit outdated when people say, you now sell to 1,000 venues in Scotland or in the UK. I think we're close to 5,000 these days. We export to lots of countries, but it didn't obviously happen overnight. And the lovely journey about us has been, it's been gradual. So we've never had an ambition. And I think sometimes in life, not having an ambition is actually almost better. You're doing something because you really enjoy it and you love your job. I have not worked in 10 years. I still get out of bed even if it's really early in the morning, and I'm really raring to go. And I'm always thinking, what's behind the corner next? Who am I meeting today who's going to enrich my life? And so actually, when people say to me, do you think, you've still got something to prove? I go, actually, I probably don't. And I was saying to Alexa earlier, this has been a quite funny week for me because I got engaged and I went into prison in the same week. And I think, thank you. And I think I've been dining out on this single mum story for quite a long time. And when Martin asked me to marry him, I went, oh, fuck, excuse my French. Like, I can't do that anymore. I'll all of a sudden have to say, well, I'm now married, and I'm respectable and all of that. So, and I think, it goes back to perspective. I have no desire to, own a super yacht or live in a 7-bedroom villa. Wouldn't want to do all the cleaning anyway. And so it's about what do you really want? The thing that I have enjoyed most has been becoming a member of a community of like-minded individuals. And this is why I think this room is so brilliant, because I feel like amongst people like me and amongst peers, about people who show respect to each other. And so about a year ago, I was again the token female speaker at a business event in Scotland. And I thought, this has to stop. I can't be always the person that they, I had long hair at the time. Now I actually cut it off short because it's almost like a statement to say, like, I'm no longer the blonde with the brewery, because it's a really easy one to kind of peddle, isn't it? So I started this fund called West Women, and that's actually the reason I'm here. It's all fair and good telling the story about why you think you're successful, and as I said, success is a little bit of a subjective thing, whatever anybody thinks is success. But the thing that I've enjoyed most over the last 12 months is that I've started this fund, which I called West Women. It's a perpetuity fund, so it basically sits in a trust. I will never reap the benefits of it. It's for perpetuity, so it's like basically whatever money the fund makes goes back into the fund to then get reinvested into businesses. And I started it for female-owned, female-run businesses in Scotland who do food and drink, because I think that's where I can add value. It's where I know most about. And I've invested in a gin business and a yogurt business, and actually there's somebody who's created this really amazing health food drink that we're kind of doing due diligence on. And basically it's about creating the next generation of people who do what we all do. Because actually, I've been surprised how little money people want and how much support they need. So it's very, very much small investments of 20, 30, 40,000 pounds at a time, which, to a lot of businesses is no longer a big chunk of money, but if you're starting out, it's a lot of money. But actually, the one thing I've realized is that it's not they want the cash. They want somebody to say, it's okay to sometimes have a wobble. It's okay to sometimes have a bad day. And, and speak to somebody about mistakes that they have made that you don't want to make yourself. And I was really lucky. I surrounded myself at the very beginning with people who really knew what they were talking about. I have a production director called Hilary Jones, who is the goddess of beer worldwide. You Google Hilary Jones beer, and there's hundreds of hits for her. And she basically was a technical director for Scottish in Newcastle until 2009. And when Heineken bought the company, she said, I don't want to work for a big business. And we, by complete and utter chance, met, and she is now the beer guru at West. So, when you have people like that on your team, it's very easy to shine, because actually, you're just the salesperson who is up front. So I always say to people when they come to me, it's like, what is it actually you need? So what are the gaps that you have in your own skill sets? And go and find the people who are much better at whatever it is than you are, because that's what really matters. That's the only way that a business can grow. So I'm using today as a sales pitch to you to basically say, first of all, if you know anybody who could benefit from this fund. Now, I know that I'm in Leeds, and I know that's not in Scotland, but I'm willing to stretch this a little bit. So you're not in London, so that's all right for me then. So and I think on the flip side, I'm really heartened by what you were saying about small businesses. I'd like you to take it to 50 or maybe even 150 employees than just the 5, but we'll have a chat over a beer after that. But so on the flip side, if there's anybody in the room who thinks, it's a brilliant idea what she's trying to do, I'm going to open my little black book to what West Women is all about. And if I can make connections for somebody who's just on the very beginning of their journey, then I'm willing to help. My email address is dead simple. It's Petra, Petra, @westbeer.com. I read all emails that come to me. Sometimes I forget to answer, so please send me another email as a reminder. But so this is very much about creating a community where we're building something. And I'm 42. I'm willing to work on this for the next 30, 35 years, if God helps me. Saying I wasn't religious, I do still think for that kind of stuff, there is somebody out there. And I just think it'd be really brilliant that if this is a room full of gifted business women, but actually if you kind of roll it out into the community of business leaders in the UK, we're still in the minority, and I think we're missing a trick. Goes back to the diversity question. There's a talent pool of 50% females, and I don't think we're tapping into that. And that has something to do with the likes of maternity leave and having babies and all of that. So if you can be my ambassadors for West Women going forward, I'll be eternally grateful. Thank you.